Rahubat. Peace. It's very windy out here. Looks like it might storm again, so I won't stay on too long. I usually got the camera flipped around to my feet, but I'll let you see my face in the shadows. First things first, round robin music video out now. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe and check the feature video on my channel. Anything else that draws you. Also, Mileage, the single, so the intro to the album will be dropping at midnight or sometime tomorrow. So the first single, well, technically second single from the Mileage album will be dropping in a few hours. Album will be coming soon, and the movie will be coming shortly thereafter. So this shadow, I want to talk about gratitude, because gratitude is the key. So what is gratitude? Gratitude is, to put it simply, even though this isn't politically correct, so to speak, or whatever, it's the state of being grateful for a thing. When I was in some of my lowest moments in my life, hands down, the key to get me out of it has always been gratitude. And I learned this thing pretty early on, like in my early 20s. I read it in a book, and I went and tested it. And every time I tested it, it checked out to be true. The mind, human mind, cannot hold a positive and a negative emotion within itself at the same time. One of them is going to override the other. Now, when it comes to any emotions, well, if you pay attention to it, if you look closely, most positive emotions are rooted in gratitude, the way I see it at least. Right? If you're happy, it's because you're grateful for something. You're grateful for the your current state of being and the things that may be in your current state of being. If you're laughing, okay, well, there's some gratitude associated with that, mixed with a bit of humor, right? Whereas if you look at it on the other spectrum of emotions, the other side of the spectrum, rather, any negative emotions, whether it's anger, sadness, sorrow, grief, frustration, any of these things, if you notice, if you look very closely on the moments where you felt these particular emotions, chances are there was an absence of gratitude. There was a void of gratitude. You weren't thinking about what you were grateful for when you were pissed off that somebody cut you off in traffic. Not at that moment. Now, if you're quick with it, maybe you'll shift to that. You'll shift to that gratitude. But in that moment, that's not the case. So here's what I figured out as I started to put this to the test. Right on my live call, What's the Word? I was talking a bit about the scientific method and how to know things. What I would do in my early 20s is I would wake up and just grab my notebook, grab my journal, roll back, Malachi. I'll grab my journal, and as soon as I wake up, before I did anything else, this is like before cell phones were really as addictive as they are now. This is like Android 1.0 days. I will grab my notebook, grab a pen, and just write down 10 things I was grateful for immediately. I'm grateful for the breath of life. I'm grateful to wake up another day. I'm grateful that the sun is shining. I'm grateful that I can hear the red bird and the bluebirds chirping outside. I'm grateful that there's a nice breeze outside when I step out to do my yoga and meditations. I'm grateful that I've learned these arts and skills of yoga and meditation and learn martial arts to train my body and to train my mind. I'm grateful to have a space to where I can listen to my music in peace and build upon this feeling, right? I would just keep writing down things I was grateful for. Grateful for, to have the opportunity to be a big brother to my younger brother and my baby sister, right? Like anything. And what I came to find is as I started doing this, I might set out to write 10 things, but once you kind of catch that flow, you'll fill up 2, 3 pages of things you're grateful for. You'll just start finding things, right? Because the mind will start aligning with it. And that goes back into that concept I was talking about with intention, how when you're holding a certain intention, kind of these satellite ideas will start to come, these supporting ideas, they'll start to come to you quicker and quicker and push you towards that desired result, right? So as I'm seeking for things to be grateful for, they started coming faster and faster and faster to where, like I said, I fill up 2, 3 pages. And then by the time I stood up, maybe 20, 30 minutes later, I already feel awesome. I already feel ready to conquer the day. I already feel, like I can do anything. I'm feeling like I got God at my side, right? And I think that's very important. And it's an exercise that, admittedly, I haven't done enough recently, but I have a lot of it kind of internalized. So sometimes I don't necessarily need to. I have other tools as well. But if you are the type of person where you find yourself kind of waking up in a funk, I would highly urge you to try that. Just try grabbing a sheet of paper and just start writing down things that you're grateful for. It can be little things, really little things. I'm grateful that the air conditioning works in my house. Or if the AC doesn't work, I'm grateful that the AC does not work in my house so I can go outside and feel the breeze, right? Anything could be flipped to gratitude, right? Every opportunity, it's kind of another principle that I've kind of learned through my life is every problem presents an opportunity, right? Every problem presents an opportunity for you to find a solution to, and then you grow stronger from this. That in itself is something to be grateful for. It's a beautiful thing. So when I started writing music in, I don't know, 2010, 2011, I was in a space to where like I was in a city that was kind of foreign to me at the time. I'm living with friends, but they're going to university. They're going to University of Central Florida. I was going to another local college at the time, and wasn't really feeling challenged. I was kind of having a hard time settling in. I wasn't really fully comfortable. I spent a lot of time, like in my truck, riding around, going to parks and stuff like that. And so I needed to have a way to kind of set my mind on the right track so that I can focus on the right things. So as I started picking up the pen, I really started leaning into this concept of writing what I call victory songs. And I still have the notebook. I think it's still in my house to this day from like 15 years ago to where I wrote, I think, 9 or 10 of them. And first, I would just write how I was feeling, right? So the first half of the song, it might be frustration, might be, confusion, might be sadness, whatever. The things that I would talk to my therapist about at the time when I used to go to therapy back then. And then what I would do, and this is honestly like it's kind of genius because this is before I learned a lot of um, these other principles and concepts. The second half of the song, I would just write how I would overcome all of those challenges. So I would write how I will overcome that sadness. I will write how I will overcome that confusion, that frustration. And before I knew it, when the song was finished, I had something that it was almost like I almost like wrote out my plans. And interestingly enough, I went and checked this notebook like several months later, like maybe like 6 months, a year later, and I started reading back through these victory songs. And what I realized was every single one of these songs, the part where the second half of the songs where I wrote my victory, I wrote the solution to it, I wrote how I overcome it. Every single one of these songs I had fulfilled. I literally fulfilled every single thing that I said I was going to do. And that wasn't even fully my intention. So that was kind of like my first taste of how powerful the pen is and how powerful the mind is at creating the circumstances that you truly desire to be in, and creating the life that you want. It was kind of a shock. I got a little bit spooked for a second because at the time I was listening to like a lot of Bob Marley and a lot of Tupac and stuff like that. And you would hear about how like Tupac was a prophet and he wrote things and then they came to pass and etc. And I didn't really like super understand that concept or how that was happening until I had experienced it myself. And I don't really write songs the same way that I used to back then, but I still kind of find a bit of that same process occurs and has occurred like over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years. I'll go back and listen to an album where I was fighting a specific challenge, and I'm like, damn, I defeated that. I won, right? So this it's a very interesting thing with the pen. Facts. Gratitude is the seed of joy. Absolutely, absolutely. It's the seed of joy. It's the seed of accomplishment. If you read books like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, or The Science of Getting Rich, or The Science of Being Great, or The Science of Being Well by Wallace D. Wattles, where he's talking kind of about finances and then just about personal achievement. And The Science of Being Well was about maintaining perfect health. Gratitude is within all of those, and it's essentially the key. Like you want to live in gratitude in the present tense, even if your environmental circumstances don't necessarily reflect that that particular state, right? You might look around and you might be in the hood. That's okay. You're also in a palace. You're also in a beautiful mansion. You also have gardens and greens and all these beautiful things around you, if you choose to, right? I talk about those books a lot, but it made a tremendous impact on my mind and the way that my mind works. So I've always been like a sharp guy, so to speak, but sometimes people can be so intelligent that it makes them stupid. They can be so intelligent and like think themselves into damnation. And I never really been the type of guy that wants to do that. So sometimes you kind of just have to simplify things. And when you just focus one pointedly on gratitude, it makes a lot of other things fall into place. A lot of things. Even when you study some of the works of Dr. Malachi Z. York, particularly like the early works, like in the Holy Tablets, where he had the chapter about the mind and how the mind works, he talked about gratitude there. I think it was chapter 6, if I'm not mistaken, or tablet 6. Um, what else? The Mind Scroll. Oh, actually, both of them. The AEO Mind Scroll, as well as the I think it was the Patarak Mind Scroll. He talked about it in both of those. He talked about it in his lecture about the Strangest Secret. So, all of the greatest minds and thinkers have kind of discovered this. Even if you go to like the more old school thinkers from like the early 1900s, late 1800s, like Ralph Waldo Emerson. He used to write a whole bunch of essays. I have a collection of them on my bookshelf. He would talk about the same thing. Everyone who's seen success in any realm, they've found that gratitude is a major key to it. So it's something to think about. It's something very powerful about it. Um, I've been in some situations to where like I remember some time ago. It wasn't really that long ago, but it feels like a lifetime ago. I don't know, maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago, something like that. I had found myself homeless, and I had been in and out of a shelter, but I discovered that the shelter had some fuck shit going on. They were like trafficking people or some shit like that, and I kind of like, I guess you could say, like mistakenly exposed them. And so They demolished that shelter the following day, which was kind of crazy. But they literally bulldozed it, and I found that that night I basically needed somewhere to sleep. I've been just kind of wandering around trying to find somewhere to rest, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that. So I just went in the alley and I laid down, and I slept for maybe 2 hours. I just set an alarm, got back up, and I remember when I was laying there, I was like, you know what? I will absolutely not experience this again another night, but I'm grateful that I went through this. I'm glad that I went through this. So I can kind of see, I felt like it gave me like a more full scope of the world because at that time, especially as a young man, uh, for the most part, people in this world, nobody's really gonna give a fuck to try to like help someone like that. They don't know what someone has going on, and I don't fault people for it. You know, they may think that the person's off on drugs or, think that they're some sort of criminal or something like that. So like, I never really held it against people. I never really was the type to like really be looking for handouts or anything like that anyway. Even when I was out there, I would spend all of my waking hours either in a Starbucks or find somewhere that I can plug in my laptop, and I was, seeking work. I was putting out applications. I was reaching out to prospects to work for, clients, all that kind of stuff. So I never really expected a handout in that regard, but I'm very grateful for that time period in my life because it showed me a lot about myself. It showed me a lot about my character, my fortitude, and just it was a very clear mirror to look into and see what's in your own eyes, to see what's at the core of your own soul, right? Because a lot of people, when they get in those situations, if they don't have themselves together and they don't have their minds together, they'll crack. And I've seen some people spin out and they'll just be out there for years and years, aimlessly, or they'll spin into drugs, or they'll get caught up in some gang shit or some shit like that. I was absolutely dead set against falling into any of that shit. Just doing whatever I could to make my way forward, not just out, forward. And I could only do that from a state of gratitude. So I'm grateful that even if it's only a few at a time, I'm grateful for all of you that pop in here and see what the hell I'm talking about. I'm grateful for my loved ones, my family, all my brothers, my sisters. I'm grateful for being chosen for this mission that I'm on, fighting on the right side of history. I wouldn't have it any other way. Even for haters and trolls and ops, I'm grateful for them too. They got a job to do. And sometimes they make things fun. I'm grateful for you too, Sinner. So yeah, just I always like to do a little call to action at the end of these little talks. My call to action to y'all out there: before you go to sleep tonight, wherever you're at, sit down in a quiet room, turn everything off, unless maybe you got like some 432 hertz meditative tones or something like that. Turn off the trap music, okay? Turn off the rock and roll, and just sit in silence. Put your notepad in your lap or on your desk in front of you. Grab a pen and just write things that you are grateful for right now, well, right then at that very moment, and just keep writing them and keep writing them. Then once you finally run out of ideas of what you're grateful for, sit back and reflect on these things. Allow yourself to allow the feeling to permeate through your body. Allow this feeling of gratitude to really, really sit in your soul and envelop you and surround you. You might wake up tomorrow and look around at the world a little bit differently. Read it over again in the morning too, by the way. Just see what happens. I told someone to do this one time. It was someone that was they were struggling with drug abuse, and it was like a friend of a friend or family member of a family member, that type of thing. They were struggling with drug abuse, and it was a sister, so she was dealing with a guy that she was dealing with was really abusive to her, and he would lay hands on her and take her money and all that kind of shit. She was into heavy drugs and stuff, and I told her to do this because she just kept spinning on this trauma that she was experiencing, and it kept pushing her further and further down that hole. So I told her to do this same exercise, grabbing a pen, start writing down things you're grateful for. And she sat down to write it. She couldn't think of anything at first, but she found herself 45 minutes later still writing, filling up the page, turning to the next page, and then she started crying. And she thanked me. She thanked some of the other people that were around the house at the time. And even if just for a little bit, it set her mind on a different track, on a different path. So it is a key. It's not the only key. The next question for yourself would be, okay, what am I going to do with this feeling? How am I going to sustain this? What sort of action am I going to take from this stance and perspective? Who else, or how am I going to give this feeling to someone else? That's how we make the world a better place. I do, I should. That's divine love. Make sure you subscribe. Round Robin music video out now. Mileage, the intro to the album, will be dropping at midnight or sometime tomorrow. So make sure you check that out on all streaming platforms. Mileage, the album, coming out very soon, and Mileage, the movie, coming out soon as well. Whole bunch of other shit. Peace. Wadu.